everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is Francis, and we have Jasper Craven back, writer, VA, cheerleader, and all-around great guy to keep coming on. Jasper, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited because you started a Substack, and the first thing that I read from it was one of my favorite Navy SEALs, Carl Higbie, who my history with Carl Higbie is, as anybody's on Twitter, is shit posting and making fun of him online because he said incredibly racist things. But he actually came into my DMs and asked if he could come onto my podcast, and I at no point in time replied to him, did not even accept the thing. I just kind of laughed about it and moved on because he is a cartoonish human being. And I couldn't, and thank God people like you are out here to write, 1,000, 2,000 words on why this man is just a massive cartoon. But I really want to get into kind of the meat and potatoes of what you have here on this. It says Carl Higbie and the bizarre theatrics of late stage patriotism. So what inspired you to put this together?
I remember seeing a number of Higbie's more bizarre, racist rants on television before he was officially canceled in the spring of 2018. And so he was sort of familiar to me in some regard, and I think always represented this bizarre new class of right-wing pundits. Veteran pundits. But recently, a source of mine pointed out that Higbie was mounting this political comeback in Greenwich, Connecticut as a member of the city council. And I just found it bizarre to watch reactionary veteran right-wing politics play out over like small town issues like, funding for the school theater program and shit like that. So I just sort of went down a rabbit hole and started thinking about what Higbie represents and sort of the damage that he and other vets on the right have wrought in recent years.
Yeah, it is very much, you have a lot of veterans who end up running on the right, and there are Democrat veterans. Ted Lieu is Air Force veteran. Tammy Duckworth, Army veteran, disabled from getting shot down by an RPG. But veterans have been pushing their way into politics, since day one. I believe, what is it, like half of our presidents have been veterans in one way or another. But it does really seem like you have, like now, especially, like not certainly in the past, we had more veteran people who would run and be veterans or be Republican conservative, but also say, hey, I'm conservative, but also we should be taking care of people. There are a few conservatives that I talk to who are like, no, I agree that we should have Medicare for all or healthcare for all, which is a huge mind fuck, like in 2020 to hear that. But also, as you mentioned in your piece, there are politicians that go back to the 60s and 70s who had no problem with things like that. Now, but one thing I would note that from a leftist veteran point of view is that a liberal veteran is still kind of beating a war drum. One thing that you mention is a kind of a push to take back the flag for Democrats, and can you kind of expound on that?
Yeah, so patriotism turned into sort of this inter-party battle after 9/11. The right really took a hard stance that they loved vets, they supported the military, they wore flag pins morning, noon, and night, and Democrats weren't really prepared to like fight that battle. They didn't really think there would ever be this competition over like who loved the country more. And so for a while, they didn't really know what the hell to do. I mean, they ran John Kerry, but it was a fairly disastrous race in which the right effectively turned him into a pussy-footing liberal, even though he won a Purple Heart in Vietnam. So like that was sort of a bizarre demonstration of how they were unprepared to deal with the right's aggression on this issue.
It was so weird too, because I remember vividly pictures of people who supported Bush with band-aids that they drew purple hearts on because John Kerry didn't deserve his Purple Heart, or but like George Bush was in the Air National Guard. He is effectively a draft dodger, and John Kerry was on swift boats and getting shot at. And the merits of the Vietnam War aside, when you're talking politics and serving, it just seemed so weird that conservatives had no problem just absolutely bashing like a literal veteran who was shot and who was wounded and had it was very and yeah, like you said, the Democrats had they're like, yeah, let's just put a Vietnam War vet up there and we'll call it good, we'll be fine. And the Republicans just absolutely flattened the Democrats. And to be fair, we're in the middle of two wars that were still fairly new and fresh, and everybody's like, we can do it, we can win. You really couldn't, I don't think you could get away with the Kerry treatment now in 2020. Although if Biden ended up picking Tammy Duckworth, like we've already seen like Dan Crenshaw and a couple of other the right wing reactionary politicians kind of do just like, oh, well, I mean, she's a veteran, but I mean, does she really love the country? It's like she lost 2 legs and an arm by getting shot down, and she still like stands for the army. It's not like me, who like didn't get wounded and comes up and is like, the army's bullshit, this is all dumb, nobody should be doing any of this. Tammy Duckworth is still like full on veteran, I love my country, put a American flag pin on it. But you see that even Democrats are not safe in these situations.
No, not at all. And I mean, an interesting thought experiment is to imagine what would have happened if Democrats actually embraced anti-war veterans and pushed that narrative, because there's clearly lots of discontent around these wars we've been fighting since 9/11, especially in the veteran community. Trump weaponized that. Other politicians have weaponized it. It's a good issue if you can actually stitch together a strong message. But the Democrats have never really done that because they've been so afraid of being cast as anti-patriotic. So instead, they've just sort of dug in and become militant. They're sort of always a step behind the Republicans, but they're moving in a rightward direction. And this, has been seen most recently with the fielding of Amy McGrath in this run against Mitch McConnell for his Kentucky Senate seat. They saw her as the strongest candidate, really, just because she had combat experience and she sort of, could run jingoistic political ads of fighter planes bombing the Middle East. That's sort of what they are hoping can swing conservatives, which I think will end up being a poor plan. I don't think McGrath will win. I don't think voters really care that she's killed, people in the Middle East.
I believe 17 points behind is where she's at right now, behind Mitch McConnell. And, we do see, you see progressive people winning all over the place. In St. Louis, where I'm from, Cori Bush, a very progressive Democrat, ousted a 50-year representative dynasty spot. And, brand new, we're starting to see that all over the place. And I hope that there is a push from a lot of these, as Ocasio-Cortez recently put forth the bill to get recruiters to stop recruiting inside of public schools, which, that's that's an argument that we don't have to have right now, but it does show that there is kind of an anti-war push for some Dems. And I think that the Democrats, what they really don't understand is you can be pro-troop and anti-war. That's perfectly fine. And honestly, I don't think that it would be difficult to go out there like me if I was running for something, to go out there and say, you guys have failed. You failed constantly. You failed constantly. You failed in your. Why are you failing and losing American lives? It's a very easy way to go with it. I feel you just kind of bludgeon the Republicans with their own bullshit, but they don't want me to run for anything. So maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't. No, I'm not going to do that. I have too much of a Twitter history. So
yeah, too.
Yeah, so I guess a question comes to why do we have to prove our patriotism? Why is this the Democrats and the people on the left have to prove patriotism? And you see, I mean, look, I work public relations, I work public affairs for the Army, so messaging, I kind of see messaging. It's I understand you're marching with the flag upside down and yelling "America sucks," but that's not going to help your cause going forward. But is there, is that what you're seeing right now? Is that there has to be some kind of, Democrats are constantly trying to prove not only that, we love our troops, but we love America. And, what is that kind of getting them?
It's not getting them anything because I don't think they're willing to go as far as Republicans have. I mean, they've now, as I said earlier, reached this level of sort of pro-Pentagon imperialism. But I don't think they'll ever endorse folks like Higbie or Eddie Gallagher or Eric Prince. I mean, they'll never stoop that low. And while, all of the aforementioned people have very dubious criminal backgrounds, they are able to claim some legitimacy in these debates because they've really seen the shit and they're strong and they look like action figures. And so they're always going to be able to outgun whichever vet the Democrats run. So it's really not going to get them anywhere. They should reconsider this stance and start reaching out to some of the post 9/11 vets in politics who have crafted coherent and powerful anti-war messages. I mean, Lee Carter comes to mind, for instance, who's a state lawmaker in Virginia. I spoke to him maybe a year ago and have never heard such a really fascinating and interesting defense of universal health care because, Lee, when he was in the military, got that for free through TRICARE and now has it through the VA. And, he was able to articulate the fact that the military, beyond just being this massive war machine, is also this huge sort of social democracy that supports its people, gives them time off, gives them good benefits. And so I think there's a way to sort of thread the needle there, not only to oppose war, but to push for, the expansion of veterans benefits into the general population.
So I want to talk a little bit more about Carl Higbie, since that's who this piece really revolves around. You did a phone interview with him, and you remarked that despite his rhetoric on the airwaves, whether it's on his show that he used to have, I believe he used to have a radio show. I'm sure he has a podcast now, but comparing that to who he is on the phone is something that's completely different. What did you observe there?
Yeah, I reached out to Carl on LinkedIn thinking he would just ignore me or call me an asshole or something. And he got back to me quickly and said, call me, when you've got some time. And I found it striking how, open and respectful and sort of moderate he came off in the conversation. I mean, he was still willing to defend some pretty extreme beliefs, but he admitted essentially that he can compartmentalize his public on-air persona with who he is in the community. I mean, he spoke to me, for instance, about this Muslim interpreter he worked with in Iraq, who he loved, who he said he'd take a bullet for. He sponsored his visa application in the United States, and they speak every day. Now, this sort of personal relationship flies in the face of Higbie's past comments that, essentially cast all Muslims as evil, violent rapists. And so I think that, bad as some of these Republican vets may be, I think they're sort of forced in some cases to really embrace this bellicose rhetoric and position because that's what the Republican Party or Fox News or Breitbart or whomever wants out of them, which I think is interesting and does not, excuse what Higbie said, but I think should force us all to sort of reckon with what the party itself, what the big machine is pushing.
Right. It's the ideology that you're putting forward doesn't necessarily match up with the ideology that you believe, and that's a problem. I mean, certainly Nate and I have always joked that if we just decided to become racist veterans, we could be making money hand over fist, but instead we had to go off and be leftists and want to stick to our politics. Even while they evolve and change, they're never going to go into racist rhetoric that Carl puts out. And I think that was the thing that I was docking him on Twitter, was just like, hey, you said fuck off, you said incredibly racist things about Muslims. And I know that it's kind of wanting to come on the podcast to do it like, hey man, I don't really believe those things. And like for a moment, I did kind of think, well, maybe I do want to get him on so I could, nail him to a wall. But like, I don't think that that's going to do any good. I don't think that, that's not going to help him. It's not going to change his mind. It's just, going to be something that's there for me to yell at him. Like, I would love to get an interview. I always wanted to get an interview with Duncan Hunter, who is a California rep, who recently was, put in prison for misappropriating campaign funds, but he was another one. He's like the first rep that followed, that was behind Donald Trump. Like, his thing is, I was the very first guy to back Donald Trump, and look at him now. He's in jail with no, with no pardon or commutation or whatever from the president. So it's a very strange, but I would love to get him on, nail him to the wall. But again, it doesn't matter, because what these guys are putting out there is exactly what everybody wants to hear. And I don't know, that's not to get all soldiery about it, but God damn it, that really flies in the face of all of our, values and traditions. I mean, it doesn't, but it does. Like, all the things that you learn about, honor and integrity and, all that other bullshit that they beat into you. And then you're just like, I'm just going to, say whatever I want because that's where the money is, which Carl like literally admits to. Like, he's just like, yeah, this is kind of what it is. And it's just really, I mean, it is interesting, but it's just really frightening in a lot of ways that, that people, as you said, he's able to compartmentalize. He's able to, not just be fooled by the propaganda, but lean into it and say, no, I need to say these things because that's just how it works. And I've heard the same things about like Bill O'Reilly and Tucker Carlson, where it's like, if you catch them like, one-on-one, they're really nice, normal people, which is, of course, I mean, I'm a nice, normal person if you catch me in, face-to-face, because that's just how we as humans are. We're not assholes to each other face-to-face on a regular basis, at least not collectively. So it's very interesting. It's a big reason why I didn't want to do the podcast with him was because I thought to myself, I bet he's got a completely different demeanor when he's one-on-one. And that's not something, personally that I wanted to be like, oh, well, let's see how Carl is. Let's see the real Carl. Like, I feel like we see that already. And I don't really play those kinds of games with people, which, of course, Jasper, I'm not, shitting on you for doing what you do. You're a journalist. This is incredibly interesting. And I love that you did your thing. I'm an asshole with a podcast. So it's, my politics and everything are completely different in this. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling.
No. And that was something that I really thought long and hard about because, and like, I didn't want to like humanize him or excuse his behavior. And I think there is a danger in that, with sort of, fleshing out some of his personal traits or like his sort of more comical attributes. I think it's worth trying to explore that in some way that can both highlight the terrible things he said, but also look at sort of how the system rewards that behavior.
Exactly. Like if if his money didn't require him to be like this, like as you said, he was a personal trainer before he got into this, and personal trainers don't make that much money. So he went into politics because he found that he's got the personality to be able to do it, and he can, he can fill a slot there. But if his paycheck didn't rely on him being a Trump supporter or him being this aggressive, I mean, he's a former Navy SEAL, so probably he still would be very Trump oriented. He would probably still be aggressive. But would we be hearing these things out of him? I don't know. Maybe, but he wouldn't have a national spotlight. Like, he would probably still be unapologetically racist, except to the one or two that he's deemed to be, good Muslims. But for the most part, it's still going to be the same. It's going to be the same thing, but now it's just multiplied and it's put out there, and Fox News and whatever other news organizations want to grab onto this and want to push it. That's a rewards that's a Skinner box, basically. It's a Skinner box for everybody, for the people who want to hear that bullshit and for the people who say it and then they get the reward of, $50,000 into your account.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So let's see. A couple of other things that he mentioned. He had attacked the Khan family, the Gold Star family who Donald Trump attacked a long time ago. And Carl Higbie's response to that was basically, look, if the Muslim ban had been in effect, then their son wouldn't have died, which is basically because he wouldn't have been allowed to join the army because they would have been banned from coming into America, which is some real fucked logic. Like, insane. It's Donald Trump could have saved your son by literally not allowing you to be here and to be American citizens. But again, that's kind of the logic that we run down with this guy.
Yeah, and I mean, Trump, more than other Republicans, has really relied on these sorts of veteran surrogates to back him up just because he said so many inflammatory things towards the veteran community, whether that's the attack on the Khan family or the attack on John McCain or sort of suggesting that veterans with PTSD are weak, which is something Higbie himself has said. And so, what these vets do besides collect a big paycheck is also just allow really dangerous rhetoric to stand and sort of by their blessing, the Fox News viewer is made to feel more comfortable with accepting that as the truth. Veterans are the last trusted citizens of this country, essentially. And so their word carries a lot of power behind it, which the right has always understood. The left really hasn't. And so I think you can draw a pretty straight line between sort of rising xenophobia, and sort of demonization of the other and these vets who are really pushing this narrative.
So in your article, you talk about how after World War II, we had one of the most, trumpeted class of veterans in politics. And this is where we got a lot of civil rights activists. And, we also got, McCarthy and McCarthyism. But we had a lot of progressive stuff post-World War II. We had a lot of rebuilding the nation. We lost, millions of lives. The country itself didn't really get messed up, physically, because we weren't exactly easy to bomb because we're America and everybody else is, closer to Germany and Japan. But, we did have our own rebuilding. The whole world had a rebuilding that it had to do after that. And you had a lot of progressive, hey, let's help out. Let's make sure that we're taking care of our people. And maybe that's that kind of like post, the horrors of war, of World War II, where it really was like horrific, especially if you're a foot soldier, ground troop, tanker, anything like that, where you're up close and personal. why is it, now we have a war, World War II versus the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. What do you think it is that makes things different this time around? What is it about, you would think, okay, we've got this war and it's been going on for a long time, and you would think that people would be sick and tired of it. Why do we still have such strong, not only right wing, but Democrat support for continuing the war machine, continuing to build up the Pentagon, and continuing the fight in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I think that's one of the biggest questions to ponder, sort of generally for people looking at militarism today. And it's hard to answer. And I think there's a lot of reasons for the shift. I think one of which is clearly that the military is now comprised of mostly poor people. There's just this massive disparity now. And the military is so aggressively recruiting from underprivileged, poor neighborhoods, which tend to often be conservative, that the military isn't really seen as a reflection of the country anymore. It's seen accurately as sort of a place where desperate people enlist to, hopefully make it into the middle class. And I think there's a lot of resentment in Southern poor communities because they feel this burden more than, New England liberals. They are seeing their communities wiped out by these wars. They're seeing their sons, daughters, friends, neighbors coming home fucked up. And so they really, they embrace that, and they take it as a sign of, or sort of a badge of pride in some ways, because, they're making these major sacrifices. But I think they also just really resent all of the liberals who don't serve. I think that contributes to it. I also think that, the Nazis were a clear-cut enemy, and it was really easy to rally behind them as a common enemy and sort of exit that conflict with rejuvenated sense of democracy and wanting to really uphold those beliefs and seeing the danger of sort of slipping from them. The wars we're fighting now are much more complex and nuanced. The basic justification for them has never been proven. And, the whole conflict is sort of built on lies.
I gotta say, Jasper, I don't know who we're fighting in either country anymore. Like, is it is it ISIS? I was told ISIS was defeated, but ISIS is back. Is it the Taliban, who we're doing negotiations with, which is great, but also there's other militant groups that the Taliban can't, keep under control themselves. So it's just like a massive clusterfuck. And it's very strange to me to come out of multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan and not think this is all fucked up and I don't know what we're doing. Like, it's very strange to me to come out of that and be like, nope, I love the military even more than before. Other than, you wanted to go in and kind of fuck people up in the beginning because you're just a bit of a sociopath.
Yeah, I think that's totally on point.
Which, not to say that for those listeners who are still in the military, and I totally understand doing it for the healthcare. There's a reason I extended my contract so I can have TRICARE for the rest of my life just in case I need it. So I fucking understand, but it is an odd mindset. But it's a mindset that we see can make you a lot of friends and make you a lot of money. I mean, Carl even says, kind of that this is just the way that things are in the military. Like that, he says that the veterans are drawn to something that's strong. So he thinks that Democrats are weak, and that's why veterans are drawn to the Republican Party. But if you do look at polling for the military, we're pretty much 50-50. We're fairly split. Whether or not we're going to be, vote Republican or vote Democrat. I know that Trump has lost a lot of support, with the military, but I know it's a very it's a broken system, man. And Carl really brings that out in this interview about how it's just a like, yeah, this is just what we do. And it is. It's Nate and I have talked often that it's perfectly acceptable in the military to say, we should just turn Iraq into a glass parking lot and let, Allah figure it out. That's a normal thing to say in the army. Nobody, like somebody, if you've got like kind of a progressive, if you say it around me, I'll tell you to shut the fuck up. But, in general, if you're around a bunch of infantry guys, you'll get a lot of heads nodding and like, yeah, our jobs would be a lot easier if we could just kill them all and let God sort them out. And that is kind of where we're at now. And I would have had that same thought about the Nazis, but it is hard to have that rallying cry behind like, okay, you're Polish and you're from Holland and you're from Australia and you're British and I'm an American and we're all going to go and be a part of this thing together to fight off this evil. But right now we're fighting an ideology, and not only does our war strengthen their ideology, but it's basically just building our own. Which is where we're getting what we have now. And I'm glad that we have, more of an anti-war movement happening, because it really kind of died out after Obama was elected. The anti-war movement just flatlined, and then Obama did the surge, and everybody's like, yeah, that should work, right? We just shove a bunch of troops in there and let them all point their guns and shoot, and eventually everybody's dead and we'll be fine. But now it's coming back, post-Obama with Trump and everything, which is irritating, Jasper. I got to say, it's real fucking irritating, but I'm glad that everybody's back on board. But I swear to God, if Biden gets elected and it goes away again, I'm going to scream into a pillow.
I don't know what the hell's going to happen. I mean, Biden is mixed. I mean, he voted to invade Iraq, obviously, but was against the surge, and I don't know where he stands, just because he is a politician who doesn't like to be clear in his statements. And, he's surrounding himself now with all of the establishment hawks that Clinton and Obama did. So, luckily there is now finally some sort of think tank, presence for these anti-imperialistic beliefs. There's people like Matt Duss, Stephen Kinzer, in that George Soros Koch-funded think tank that I'm spacing on the name. But there's now people are starting to draft like policies. I mean, my big question was always like, okay, how do we get out of these wars? Like, what are the steps here? How can we create a plan that is effective and doesn't just undermine the cause? And I think that work finally is starting to happen. I don't know if the Biden presidency, should it come to pass, will embrace that ideology, or whether they'll, remain skittish and not want to risk political damage should it not work. But I don't know.
He's already said, there's plenty of progressive policies that he's already, said, no, we're not going to do that, like legalization of marijuana and healthcare for, Medicare for all, or some kind of single payer universal healthcare. He's like, no, we're not going to do any of that. So I imagine the wars will not be toned down at all, especially since like we can't seem to like even take 10% off the top of what we give the Department of Defense or the Pentagon. It's like, look, can we just not give them $760 billion? Can we only give them $700 billion? It's like, no, we can't do that. That's very un-American. It always comes down to you don't love the troops. And, if I can put something out there about how funding in the military goes, Nate actually said this to me. It's like, you'll be on a military base that has the most high-tech airplanes ever, and then you hit the button for the water fountain and a bunch of ants come pouring out of it. The money doesn't get spent on us guys. I don't know if you knew this. Like we get like a 2.3% raise once a year, but that money doesn't come to me ever. Like it goes into a bunch of weapons projects that don't work. It goes into Ospreys that crash. It goes into F-35s, which choke out the pilots. It doesn't come to me. So it's perfectly okay to cut the budget a little bit. But I do know that if they did that, they'd immediately just start taking money away from the actual troops, because that's we're the last ones to get it and we're the first ones to lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was that scandal last year about military housing just being racked with mold and, these homes on bases just falling apart and making people sick. I mean, so there's so much evidence out there that the left can use and make a coherent argument against, and find vets on the left who can run with this and push it. I mean, the power and promise of this call to defund the police can so easily be coupled with the same call to defund the Pentagon, to look at the budget, to look at the fact that the Pentagon can't even pass an audit of the books, that there's just this money, billions of dollars, that goes into a black hole. I mean, I'm not a genius here, but I can see how to connect this all and create a fairly powerful political argument, but the left is just unwilling to do it.
I feel like the left it's not so much unwilling. Well, the Democrats are unwilling. The left just doesn't have the means to at this point. Or maybe they do and they just don't want to. Maybe the leftists are too busy fighting other leftists. But that's just my experience on Twitter. That's not the real world. But like I said, there is certainly a groundswell. There is, it started with the quote squad in 2016, in 2018, which still continues today, and more people are joining it. There's more progressive people that are being elected, and it's great and wonderful. However, we do have to remember that also more crazy people on the right wing are being elected as well, because there's nobody that runs to oppose them, or the people who do run to oppose them they don't have the funding, they don't have the backing that would help them out. Not even just like a McGrath versus McConnell kind of thing, just your local state elections or your local representatives. I think like a QAnon conspiracy person recently won their primary and will probably win their place because they're it's a rural area, they're a Republican, the Republican wins the rural areas by default. So we're about to have a QAnon conspiracy theorist in the House. I don't know what that does for us going forward, but I will say at least on some of the upper echelons of government, as much as I make fun of Seb Gorka on his show, if you ever watch people call in and ask him about QAnon, he gets that like, no, QAnon's not real. Stop words. Don't call in about the QAnon. It's not real. You're being lied to. And and he hates it. He hates it so much. And personally, I think more people should call in because I support harassing Seb Gorka to any degree. But there is at least some. the QAnon seems to be like the wall that most people will not try to climb over. It's just like that's where the crazy people are. The Pizzagate kind of conspiracy was too. But Trump backs the Pizzagate piss boy Jack Posobiec. So who knows what's going to be happening in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, the left should just start making conspiracy theories that undermine the Pentagon. That's how we should respond.
We don't need to. The Pentagon's fucking insane. I mean, if you spend 20 minutes reading about MK Ultra, you should be like, we need to drag everything and beat it into a pulp and salt the earth. Put those like nuclear wastes, this place should be left shunned and uninhabited signs all over the place. Like it's absolutely horrible. And they still do it. I mean, I've often talked about how the military jacked me full of anthrax vaccination before the FDA actually approved it. It's absolutely terrible and horrible, but we're soldiers. We don't really get a whole lot of say in that stuff, which is another reason I tell people not to join the army. It's like you basically are telling the government that you're willing to be like a push pincushion for whatever they think might happen. Like the COVID vaccinations, I've heard like, oh, the troops will get that first. Like, that just means that they're testing it on us. That's not good, guys. You don't want that first. Just wear a fucking mask and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Now, all right. So, I want to circle back to Carl to kind of start moving to close this out, because you said that the thing that fascinated you about Carl Higbie is he's doing this. He's trying to make a comeback, but he's doing it at like the lowest level, like the lowest thing that you can be elected as, and starting from the bottom. But in that, you mentioned that like on a Zoom call, and he's just in the basement cleaning his guns and calling his fellow board members fascists. Like, how is this? How is this a winning strategy? How does this work for him?
I don't know. I don't know if it will work in Connecticut, but it might. I mean, he was able to win this city council seat in Greenwich, and there's a really fantastic piece in the New Yorker a couple months ago by Evan Osnos that examines all of the rich reactionaries in Greenwich who have come to love Trump and will most likely be voting for him this November. So I think that Higbie is hoping to sort of find, fellow soldiers in the town who will wage these cultural wars with him. I mean, he sees himself as Connecticut governor one day. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen. Certainly, he would get a lot of attention, and he would, he sort of has some baked in goodwill because he fought in the SEALs for this country to kill supposedly bad people. But I don't know. I doubt that he'll be able to make it happen just because of how viscerally hated he already is in these few months on the job. I guess shortly after he won, he was like working out at the Equinox gym in Greenwich, and someone carved a swastika into his truck. And then a city council member who works with him compared him to David Duke. He told me that like people have like poured blood on his driveway. So, there's definitely like some, resistance libs in Greenwich who are making it clear they don't like his brand of politics. But, especially in a place like Greenwich, there are a lot of sort of silent extremists on the right who don't want to ruffle any feathers, but probably are silently like
supportive. Yeah. Supportive of him.
There have been Republican members of the city council that have defended him and said, he deserves to be given a second chance. And like, he's not as openly hostile and racist as he once was. I think he learned that he couldn't say the quiet part out loud after CNN dug up all these terrible things he'd said. So, I mean, he hasn't changed that much, but he's at least learned to sort of like reframe his arguments in such a way that they can't as easily be tied to reactionary beliefs. So maybe he'll learn even more on the city council how to do this and sort of, emerge in his run for governor as a relative moderate in the party in a couple of years. Who knows?
Yeah, it does. And it starts to, it feels like Eric Greitens in Missouri, who resigned in shame, but he's already filed to run for office in Missouri. And he's been on the Eric Greitens comeback tour recently, where he delivered a bunch of masks to first responders and firefighters in Kansas City and in St. Louis, and he's doing the glad hands, let's all smile and shake hands. And the thing about Greitens is that, I mean, he's a garbage person. He's a former SEAL. He's a Republican. He's a Missouri Republican, which is even worse. But he's not as egregiously terrible as Carl Higbie has ever been. And so, Carl, one, you could probably move to Missouri and catch like at least a representative spot. Like you could go down to Texas County or something if you're willing to live in the middle of nowhere. Our gun laws are just insanely lax. Like it's not hard to get a gun at all. You can just buy them out of the back of somebody's pickup truck. You don't even need a firearms license, and you can while away. Like we're the state that produced the guy who said that women's bodies have a way of shutting things down during a rape so that they don't get pregnant. We're the home of Josh Hawley, who is just a terrible ethno-nationalist, but he does nice things for some people, so he ends up getting a pass. And so Carl, I'm just saying, Missouri might be where you need to really try to do your comeback. But if you're comfortable up in Connecticut, maybe just a state representative seat or something like that will will take care of you. You can work out. You never have to go to Washington, D.C. You just stay where you're at and just fucking slowly go to pieces or something because the rest of the world doesn't fucking want you around it.
Yeah, and I mean, he was so loyal to Trump in 2016 that there's even a chance that he becomes a surrogate again. I didn't include this in the piece, but Higbie told me that he's spoken to Brad Parscale, who's Trump's campaign manager, about perhaps becoming a surrogate in 2020. I think he's aware that, he's got some baggage now and he may not get asked and called up for the team, but it seems possible.
Yeah, I mean, look, Trump himself has said horrible things and he's pardoned war criminals, so it would be interesting to see if Carl is the kind of guy who flew too close to the racism sun and like his Trump wings have fallen off and he's plummeting back to the ground, which is fine, but that's also everything that he said is not a disqualifier at all for what's going on, because there's never been more of a Trump defender than Carl Higbie, and if there's one thing Trump loves, it's loyalty more than anything else. So there's always that chance that we could start seeing Carl pop up again, and with toned down racism, but still a lot of racism, I'm sure.
Yes, I think you're right.
All right, so Jasper, you're writing on Substack now. It's called Battleborn. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've been a freelancer for a few years. Written for a number of outlets, but have routinely found it frustrating that it can take a while for a story to sort of move through the system from pitch to final product. So a couple weeks ago, I launched this Substack. It's called Battleborn, BATTLEBORNE. It focuses on veterans issues in the military. I do weekly dispatches. Mostly they're reported pieces about all sorts of things. I'm actually working right now on a story about medical marijuana in the veterans community, and this terrible story about this black vet named Sean Worsley, who had a medical marijuana card for his PTSD in Arizona. He was driving through Alabama. He got caught by the cops and is now facing 5 years in prison. This guy won a Purple Heart for clearing bombs in Iraq, and his life has been destroyed. So I try to focus on sort of the issues of the day. I'm going to be doing Q&A with vets, and, am always hoping that vets will reach out with ideas, tips, and suggestions. The newsletter is free, but if folks are game to pitch in like $5 a month, that will really help me, as, these stories take time, and I'm trying to make them high quality and acting sort of in a role both as writer, reporter, copy editor, fact checker. It's a lot of work, but I think I'm enjoying it so far.
Yeah, we'll post up the Carl Higbie article in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You can follow Jasper on Twitter. You're what, Jasper_Craven?
Yep.
Follow Jasper, and definitely reach out to him and us for all of your military stuff. Jasper does a lot of really good reporting on the VA and the military and the Pentagon in general. So highly recommend you sign up and read his stuff. Jasper, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the show.